to shift gears a little bit and go more directly to some spaces and people working to preserve and enhance those spaces. The Friends of the Warren Ferris, I'm sorry, it's really the Constellation of Living Memorials and the Friends of the Warren Ferris Cemetery Project are here with us today. And we have 4 speakers, so I'm going to introduce them all at once up front here, and then they'll reintroduce themselves a little bit so y'all will know who is speaking. And first we'll have Julie Fineman, and she's the president of the cemetery group and the founder of the Constellation of Living Memorials. She's relatively new to Texas, came to Texas in 2017 after a career as a photographer in Hollywood. So that's a thread there, photography in these beautiful spaces that we all know and love. And when she moved to the Dallas area, her most convenient greet space near her home was the Warren Ferris Cemetery. So that sort of started her journey of working to sustain this beautiful space. And let's see, the next person in the group will be Corrin Breeding. And Corrin is a man of many trades, it seems like, I think. He has a background in horticulture, landscape architecture, land and property development, and project management. And so he's working to, in all those areas, to create holistic design in some of these public spaces and, work with the group to expand the program to some additional spaces. And next will be Matthew. Now, Matthew is coming to us via Zoom. Is that correct? Yes. Okay. And Matthew works in agriculture and natural resources in Dallas County. And he's an extension agent with the AgriLife Extension in that area. And so he's going to speak to us via Zoom. And then finally in the group is Monica Newberry. And she is an actual cemetery administrator with Oakland Cemetery. And she has a particular focus on the cemeteries in her area. And it is that the early Mexican-American burial grounds in the Dallas area and Texas in particular. So I think all 4 of these speakers bring an interesting viewpoint and perspective to the project, and they're going to share that with us today. And we will start with Julie Fineman.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Julie Fineman, and it is a pleasure speaking to this group today. I remember when I first landed here from California back in 2017, I knew it was finally my chance to connect with nature in a way that I just didn't have the time before. And I was so focused in my former career. And I figured, okay, this is the time. This is the last quarter of my life, and I want in. And so 2018, I became a member of the Native Plant Society Dallas chapter. And of course, the learning curve when you first start at this age is incredible. It's like straight up. And I thought, I'm not going to let this scare me. I'm going to lean into it and go easy with myself, knowing that I will eventually get there wherever there is. So in 2019, I became, how do I advance this? There we go.
The boop sound. Right?
Oh, there we go. We're good. And in 2019, I became a master naturalist and master gardener student simultaneously, and wanted to deep dive and quickly learned the cemetery next door to our home, which when we first moved in, it was like, oh God, who wants to be living next door to a historic cemetery that's neglected? And I just thought, well, the area that this house was in is so beautiful that we can turn our head and just pretend like it doesn't exist. That was my attitude. And it was covered in evergreen. So I just thought, great, it's a shield from the street, it's a buffer. Let's leave it at that. Then in 2019, when I became a student, 3 months later, I realized I was living next door to a natural disaster. It was privet city, wall to wall, floor to floor carpet. And I gathered my neighbors and I said, listen, this is not only an embarrassment already, but now armed with knowledge, we now have to do something about it. So we took about 3 months surgically removing the privet, and I won't get granular about what that means, but we were on our hands and knees every weekend, about 5 hours a day for 3 months, removing the privet. And the cemetery is a remnant. It was once 4 acres, it's now 1 acre. So we were finished removing the privet come the end of March, beginning of April. And then before you knew it, a rush of Engelmann daisies, as you could see, just was the carpeted the front. We didn't even know that they existed. And you could see how on the left, there was one walking area that you could go in, and that's as far as you can go. And as you could see, once we cleared it, it's much more expansive. You could walk the whole grounds without having just to walk into this hole and walk back. And so during the cleanup phase, because it takes years to clean up, because the privet wants to keep coming back and other invasives. And during the cleanup phase in that first year, a wonderful woman, historian and professor, Suzanne Starling, approached me and said, I wrote a book about Warren Angus Ferris. Are you interested in learning about this man? I said, of course, he's my neighbor. Why not? And I didn't really, at the time, really have a big desire to learn about the local history because it was already enough learning about the natural history. And so I thought, okay, yes, of course I'll read it. And so upon reading it, I fell in love with this man and realized we have something really unusual here. People in my neighborhood don't know that this cemetery exists for the most part. There's an elementary school across the street that doesn't know that the cemetery exists. And Warren Angus Ferris is the first person to survey all of Dallas when it was wilderness. When nobody was here, he was the first person to lay the lines of Dallas, of Natchitoches, of the Trinity River, where the three come together. And his history is profound, and nobody knows about this man. And so I had this aha moment, also coming from the marketing industry, but from a photographer's point of view in Hollywood, shooting ad campaigns for movie posters to ad campaigns for TV shows and whatnot. And realizing that how could I market this to make it interesting enough to cast the widest net possible to get as many people involved in this restoration process? Because coming to Dallas from the West Coast, we don't have as many of these historic cemeteries scattered so closely together, especially in the urban settings. And I was really fascinated about that because it was a novelty for me. And so, let me advance. So we realized we were going to start putting together a formula. First, starting with speaking to the choir here, expanding native green spaces in these cemeteries. And most historic cemeteries are not well kept, or if they're kept at all. And if they are kept, they're mowed and below to Dust Bowl status. And so let's expand to create native green spaces, key native. Of course, enhance climate resiliency, lower the heat island index, repair pollinator populations. And as Jennifer so eloquently put, without the pollinators, we have an ecological collapse, which will then impact profoundly public health in these urban spaces. So these cemeteries that are all over, that can be reimagined as these incredible wildlife sanctuaries in these portals, these sanctuaries that are already sacred, to now embrace it holistically by creating a tapestry of bridging the gap between humanity and nature, and where we're speaking about the history of local culture and the history of local nature. So now we are casting the net as wide as possible. And with that, we want to bring those who love history into the fold of the Native Plant Society. So, and of course, we want to grow our communities to make this very accessible, to really connect with authentic sense of place, which in turn allows one to reconnect with their soul. Because when you're in these spaces, something magical happens. So while I was putting together the foundation with a collection of other people, it's not just me, other great thinkers, the Constellation of Living Memorials, the foundation has to be based on, of course, the environment. We need community engagement, and we cannot do it without the government knowing that we're doing this, and for them to be involved. So we are now in the second year of our pilot to work out the kinks that are where we have 5 other historic cemeteries in Dallas and historically marginalized communities that are a part of this pilot project. We found our equilibrium our first year in each cemetery, realizing what part of the cemeteries they want to restore. And everyone has found their place, they're stable. So now this year, we're reaching out to community to start engaging with them in order for them to realize, let's go back to the day when Jennifer was speaking, where we can use these as beautiful wildlife sanctuaries to enjoy, and not just a place of where we bury our loved ones and maybe go back a couple times a year. And so I won't drill down into this aspect, but it's rich. And if you're interested, you can go to the website for that deep dive on this aspect. So since we launched our pilot in October of 2023, these are the first magnificent treasures that were revealed. Monica Newberry from the Oakland Cemetery is a volunteer lead and admin of the Oakland Cemetery. So she leads the volunteers in the restoration project at the Oakland Cemetery. John Hampton at the Beeman Cemetery. Kim Cole at the Albert Carver Cemetery. Van Johnson at the Western Heights Cemetery, another camera shy fellow, so he's hiding in the crowd. And Kathy Ann Reed, who's a volunteer lead at the Glover Cemetery. Kim Conroe, who could not be here today, she hurt her back, and she's former president of the Native Plant Society of Texas. She was instrumental, along with Harriet Earhart, in creating the formula of the natural curriculum that we wanted to create for the Constellation of Living Memorials. And I don't believe we have time to watch this segment of the documentary that we created 2 years ago. And you could find this on our YouTube channel, Constellation of Living Memorials. I highly encourage you. It was, we shot this at the Laura Bush Gardens that surround the George Bush Gardens, which is the model of what we are today. And Harriet Earhart was in that, along with Joni Carswell, who is the CEO of Laura Bush's nonprofit called Texan by Nature. So when I started doing some digging a couple years ago and was curious, well, how many cemeteries are there in Texas? And this was about 4 or 5 years ago. So I found this map on the Texas Historical Commission's website, it's a government website. And at the time, it said 50,000 cemeteries. And when they saw that I was using this as the movie poster for the Constellation of Living Memorials, I got a call and they said, well, we don't know if it's 50. We now have, are staying very conservative in our calculations. It's very hard to collect the data of how many cemeteries, including the historic cemeteries. And I said, well, why is it so difficult? She said, what constitutes a historic cemetery is when it turns 50 years old, that's when it becomes considered historic. So it's really hard for them to calculate that. So I had to change that 50 to 15,000. So you can imagine the impact. A third of these cemeteries are in need or neglected, and a lot of them are in urban environments. So you can imagine the impact that we can have by reestablishing wildlife sanctuaries in these spaces. Also, notice how the monarch butterfly migratory pathway comes through that swath of land. That's blackland prairie, timber on both sides, cross timber. And it was also brought to my attention just recently from a professor at SMU and a pastor, Clarence Glover. When he saw this map, his eyes started to tear up. And he said, Julie, Texas was founded through and grew through the cotton industry, cotton plantations. This is where so many historic African-American cemeteries are that aren't even on this map. And so with that, I give you Corrin to continue the conversation. And thank you.
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you, Julie, for that introduction. My name is Corrin Breeding. I'm originally from Athens, Georgia. My background is in landscape architecture. I got my MLA from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and also have a background in land and property development from Texas A&M University. And I've had a hodgepodge of a career where I spent time in commercial construction, land development, but I fell back in love with design because I saw a lot of things on what I call the dark side of the design build industry that really should be corrected on the front end through design. So that's what kind of has led me through this new chapter of my career where I work for myself as a landscape designer that also provides some project management services. And about 2 years ago, when I'm building my company, I get a call from a mentor of mine that goes by the name of Dr. Christopher Hunter, who's a professor at Texas A&M right now in the architecture department, and he mainly focuses his research on historic Black churches. So he calls me one day and he's like, hey, I'm studying these Black churches across the country that have these cemeteries attached to them. And he was like, I'm not a landscape architect. You should be, or someone like you should be studying this from a spatial, spiritual, and physical aspect. At that time, I was really busy and started to tell him no, but I was like, I can't tell my mentor no. And I said, this may be, some interesting information to learn. And it's one of the better pursuits that I've had recently. And one aspect of it that really reached me was, these are photos of my ancestors. Just about everybody in these pictures have transitioned. And, in African-American culture, and a lot of different cultures celebrate spirituality, but I know from my upbringing, we were always told, honor your ancestors and know where they come from. And that can be a difficult journey for African Americans, especially with our heritage and attachment to slavery. So, but still throughout life, there's so much symbolism in our culture that that's a remnant of some of those early spiritual practice. For example, I'm sure somebody at one point in the room has heard the term pouring one out for the homies. That's a form of libations and the pouring of libations that stems from West African culture. The top right picture is what I call my ancestor shrine. I know I have a lot of friends that have this ancestor shrine that has a lot of relics and trinkets. For me, obituaries were very popular in my family because it was a way to learn about an ancestor that passed on. So I collected those as well, but that's also an ancient form of just paying tribute to those that came before you. So you see these remnants of these cultures in modern day, and thank God for technology, because now bridging the gap between your ancestors and current day relatives has become a lot easier. So the research that I did, I focused on 3 cemeteries and found a lot of similarities. One was the Lutheran Cemetery in Louisiana. The other one was the Fineman Cemetery in Dallas, Texas. And then the one that I'm going to highlight today is the Pierce Chapel African Cemetery in Columbus, Georgia, which is located in Harris County. And what you see here is a picture of Yamona Pierce. She is currently the founder of the Hamilton Hood Foundation, and she advocates for those seeking their ancestral burial grounds to try to reclaim them. So for her, she was doing genealogy research, and she found where her ancestral burial lands were. However, it's in the middle of a wooded area because it was a pre-emancipation cemetery. So unfortunately, these people weren't allowed the same type of opportunity to bury their dead where they're more memorialized in time. It was literally just, hey, here's, throw them in the ground, do your thing, and get back to work. But ironically, they still, even under that immense pressure and lack of resources, they were still able to do a great job in the way they designed these spaces, the way that they honored their ancestors through their burial practices that I'm going to go through here in a bit. But a little bit more background about this particular site in Columbus, Georgia. Columbus, Georgia was founded in the early 1820s when plantation owners from Virginia moved their families and they're enslaved to this area. And what's very interesting, based on some of Yamona's research, one of the very first structures that was built was actually the church. And right now there's some research going on to see, or really to confirm that is actually the original church that was built. I know they have found it on the inside, some of the original architecture and windows and different aesthetics on the inside were actually constructed by those enslaved individuals, and where you see marked in with the red outline. And this needs to be updated because it's actually bigger than this based on some latest studies. But that's the limits, or was the limits, thought to be the limits at first, of the African cemetery. The dotted white box is where the plantation owners' burial grounds are. So stark difference of the location. One unique thing that I definitely have to add with this image is that one pattern that I saw when studying these different cemeteries, throughout the South, was that if the enslaved individuals were able to choose their own burial plots, which in this case they were, they often chose it to be located on a bluff overlooking a body of water. So you see the Flat Rock Creek there. And that all stems from their spiritual belief. They want it to be next to water because they believe that once the soul leaves the body, since liquid is very fluid, it's a way to transition into the next life. They also wanted their burial plots facing east. So when Gabriel blows his horn from the east, they'll rise up and already be facing in that direction. So a lot of spiritual connection, even with the layout of these spaces. There's also some speculation that either it was already a wooded area. So like, hey, when we are doing our burial practices, we can also meet and kind of talk amongst each other, have that little bit of freedom. Or maybe it was once open land. However, they used plant material to mark their graves. And it was not only because their respect for nature, their understanding of nature and usage of native plants, but it was also because they believed that from a spiritual standpoint, once they go into the earth and the plant processes, natural processes happen, that when the body breaks up, it goes into that plant. So you can go back to that space and interact with your ancestors. So very well thought out ways of laying out these their cemeteries. So once again, this is just a picture of the existing church that was, like I said, believed to have been built by the enslaved individuals. And the pictures on the right are the pictures of the plantation owners' burial plots. And here is what the burial ground looks like for those enslaved. So once again, you see a lot of broken headstones. They would use white stone sometimes as a grave marker, and that kind of goes back to ancient cultures when I'll show you on the next slide. And once again, the usage of native plants. So a lot of these plants have believed to have been there, since the construction of this grave site because of the knowledge of having known that they use native plant materials to mark burial grounds. Another very interesting cultural phenomenon that was discovered was that they would also place trinkets on these burial grounds as a way to, once again, pay tribute, honor their ancestors. You will find glass bottles, the head of a hoe, maybe that hoe was what they used throughout their life to get to perform the different tasks that they were assigned to do. And also just different little trinkets. So once again, thinking about how this space was used on a day-to-day basis. Once again, looking at different burial customs and practice, we know that in Nigeria, the wearing of white and the color of white is very prominent in different burial procedures. And once again, we know that today, that's also a very common thing. So as more research comes out, just trying to find different common themes throughout different burial customs from Africa to the Americas and how those are tied together. And also, another thing that you notice is the different spiritual systems that come into play. So definitely Christianity. I've been told about books that talk about the Islamic faith during the same time frame, during the pre-emancipation, some of those customs coming into play. African culture, Caribbean culture, this fusion of culture from all over the globe when it comes to burial practices. So just something to think about. And also, how does these findings play into modern day Negro spirituals? We have Wade in the Water. You have a lot of songs that talk about freedom. And so how even does the spiritual side of things come out when you think about these different cemeteries and the customs that are there? And this picture was provided to me because, once again, another reason why they chose to put some of these places near bodies of water so they could practice baptismal procedures and things of that nature. So tying all that together again, and then, the celebration of life, I don't know how many of y'all have been to Mardi Gras, where they're dancing. I remember when an artist recently died, Frankie Beverly and Mays. Frankie Beverly was the one that passed, and they paraded his casket through the streets. And that's just a way to honor the dead. So making these very festive scenarios as a way to pay homage and celebrate life, and, thinking about how can we bring that back to the cemetery. I love this picture because this is, once again, Yamona and some of the descendants of those that are believed to have been buried there. And they're literally standing, I call this picture standing in the gap, and they're literally standing in the gap where the current landowner allowed a utility company to come plow right through it. So there's no telling how much destruction was done. So Yamona has called it upon herself and the other descendants we must protect this space. This is where this location is where our ancestors are buried. So let's see how we ourselves can change the narrative and really protect this site and use it for good. So one thing that Yamona has done that has been very successful, she has raised a lot of money, partnered with a lot of different organizations, and she has various programming within the space. So this is the Juneteenth week she had. So she gives talks at the cemetery space. They have cultural programming in the neighboring church. And she's also partnered with the local museum to have a type of exhibit where clothing from that era is displayed. So you can go to the museum, learn about, different people throughout time, what they did and what type of clothes that they wore. And this is all tied to the Pierce Chapel African Cemetery. Another great opportunity that I had to be involved in when I traveled was a historical reenactment of what would church look like, or cultural experiences be during the post-Reconstruction era. She wanted to actually reenact what it would be like during slavery times, but unfortunately she couldn't find enough clothing, so they chose post-Reconstruction. And so she reenacted what a baptismal would look like. She reenacted what a picnic during that area would be like. And talking with the people on site, they would say like, hey, I remember we would go to the cemetery and we would have weddings. We would go to the cemetery and we would have family gatherings. We would go there and make it a festive thing. So how do we reimagine that for today? So many cemeteries are barren and unutilized, but going back to the design process, how can we as designers, when we're redesigning these spaces or redesigning new cemetery sites, how can we take that old history and bring it back and make that land more useful? Another really cool thing, we had a photographer from New York, and I hate that I don't remember his name, but he came down and he specializes in utilizing old equipment to capture photos. So it was a great outcome. He still hasn't sent the photos that he captured, but trying to recreate what photography would even look like in that area in that era from an educational standpoint just provides more ways to pay tribute, to provide educational opportunities in this space. And we also partnered with the historic Westville community to shoot some other photos. So what would a sermon look like and sound like back in that day? So once again, just really immersing ourselves in this culture and paying homage to old custom and practices. And this is the last slide. This is something that was very powerful, a statement that was made by Yamana when she was being interviewed. When they transition, it didn't or doesn't mean that their stories transition. Those stories, their dreams, their hopes are very much alive today. It represents the stories and historical journeys of the lesser known community and lesser known history. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone, for being here. My name is Monica Newberry. I'm the administrator at Oakland Cemetery in Dallas, Texas. So I'm going to give you, first, I'm going to make sure I can change these pictures. Yes, I can. I know how to work a computer. It's what I do. No, I started at Oakland 5 years ago. We were abandoned and closed. They shut the gates. They locked the gates. We went and took over 47 acres of abandoned land. Completely overgrown, privet everywhere, trumpet vine, just everything you don't want. We had plenty of it. So we spent about 4 years clearing the land, pulling privet, pulling out vine, pulling out, just you name it. I can't really, Julie, is there a picture of how terrible it was? No, there isn't. And then about 3.5 years into that process of having cleared so much, we started seeing the most amazing things come up that we didn't see before. So when you clear several acres of privet, all of a sudden something comes in and replaces it. And then we have these beautiful stands of little blue stem grass that came up, and we're like, what? We're not naturalists. We're not native plant people. We are ladies with weed eaters going crazy. And we're like, what is this? We want to know more about this one particular grass. The little blue stem is what really stands out to me, is that one particular grass and how it started to change the way we were looking at our grounds and what we thought there might be there to offer. And then we started having things come up and bloom. We had the black-eyed Susans. We have tons of bluebonnets. All of these things started coming up, and we thought, okay, this might be special. And I think that what makes cemeteries so special is that it's non-developed land. Usually these historic cemeteries, they've never been grazed. They've never been plowed. They've never been turned into a parking lot and then returned into this. And this is the ground that has been here since the beginning of time. Someone was buried there at one time, and then it was left alone again. No one redug it. No one came in and did anything to it. that seed bank, what exists there has been what's existed there since the beginning of time. We didn't realize this. We had no idea. A little over a year and a half ago, Julie Fineman came to me with Constellation of Living Memorials and said, we have 5 cemeteries that are willing to participate in rededicating part of their land to prairie preservation and prairie restoration. Would you be interested in joining us? And I thought, oh, what a great opportunity for me to get my board of directors to agree to stop mowing all of the cemetery. If I can say 5 other cemeteries are also going to do the same thing, we're not crazy. They will agree that maybe we're not crazy or lazy. And they did. They thought, okay, the 5 other local cemeteries are participating in this. Then it's not just Monica, being kooky. This might be valid. So Julie reached out to the North Texas Master Naturalist and said, we'd like to put our program into your class projects for your new students. And new students chose Oakland to come out and do their lab work. And these new students were making, I don't want to exaggerate here, but well over 1,000 observations in that first year that they were out there on the grounds of native species, from bugs to flora to fauna to you name it. They were going crazy. It was like turning kids loose in a toy store. They just couldn't get enough of it. But it really started to teach us on the other end, those of us that were just there running the mowers and running the weed eaters, how special the land really was. We gave them their part, stepped away, said, have fun. But when they kept coming back at us with so much excitement, oh, we've identified this and identified that, it's completely now changed the way we manage all 47 acres of the cemetery. Our landscapers are like, well, we want to mow it the highest our deck can possibly go to allow for everything to bloom. Then the next thing you know, our entire cemetery, and when I say 47 acres are covered in wine cup mallow, 47 acres. My cemetery was purple. It was one big purple, beautiful field. And the other cemeteries, I'm sorry, I should be changing these. That's a little B. So, our agreement was in the prairie project area that we do a 2-year mowing hiatus. As we don't mow, incredible stuff is showing itself. This spring is going to be, I'm so excited about spring. I want to go home right now and see what happened yesterday, because that's how quickly everything is happening. As we're allowing the seed bank to emerge, which 6 months ago, I had no idea what a seed bank was. I don't know what that is. We are seeing we've got all kinds of beautiful things coming up constantly. And the other cemeteries that are participating in the Constellation of Living Memorials are also having the same success, but we're all working our programs different. Oakland doesn't have an irrigation system. We don't have water on the grounds. We're not doing planting. We're only allowing what's already there. We're giving it space to flourish. Other cemeteries who are not as lucky as us to have so much biodiversity, and we got biodiversity out the wazoo, they're introducing native plants because they're having to bring in some natives to really get that biodiversity. So each one of these cemeteries is doing this in a different way, but we're all working towards the same goal, to create something within our community to rededicate those cemeteries to something that our communities can utilize, that is better for the ecology, that's a better land management practice, something sustainable, and really letting Mother Nature, not trying to force it anymore. We try to control Mother Nature so much, and I think in these situations, it's like, okay, we're just gonna have to let you have control. Just don't bring your damn privet with you. So through the Constellation of Living Memorials, the community engagement's been wonderful, because they've gone into to local schools, they've gone into local churches, they've let the communities know what's going on at these cemeteries. We're starting to get involved with a wellness program to use these areas for for their walking trails. I think we've got over 1.5 miles of walking trails within our cemetery. So in the community, it's got lovely paved walking trails that just happen to be there. So we're using it for art projects. Student writers are coming in to write poetry from our local high school, which is just wonderful. And when you sit in the middle of this prairie space and all you hear is the birds chirping and all you hear, and tons of birds. I saw your Oakland pictures. Jennifer came out to Oakland and photographed some birds. My first time to meet you, though. I do have the book. It was mailed to me. Sorry. Yeah. You sit there, you experience the birds, you really get in touch with nature. It's so good for students. We're right in the middle of South Dallas. We are a mile away from Fair Park. I mean, we are in the heart of the city. And so having that 47-acre green space is very unique to our neighborhood. Opening that up to the public and creating events like here we have a picture of our Dia de los Muertos event, which was wonderful. Creating events that invite the public in to enjoy what we are establishing. There's no point in establishing this beautiful little prairie preservation areas if no one's enjoying it but me. So if I'm the only one out there getting excited about it, we want everyone to get excited about what's going on with Constellation. So Julie has done a wonderful job of reaching out to our public. Our engagement strategies, I should know more about this, folks, but I know I'm kidding. We're going into our community meetings, our neighborhood association meetings, our after-school youth program meetings. A lot of our churches have after-school programs for their teens, for their students. Going in, Julie's, I think, what was it, the beekeeping class that was done for students. We've got the planting pollinators. The kids are going out and enjoying planting pollinators. Then they get to come back and check on their plants. Then they get to come back and watch their plants grow. And so all of these great community programs are, really something that our youth benefit from, that our youth can really, really benefit from. And using this cemetery space to do it is the perfect opportunity. It's good for the city. Cemeteries don't pay property taxes. So when we no longer sell graves, when we're past the point of selling graves, when we've aged out of that, the city doesn't really generally give two damns what happens to us. And it's just like, whatever, it's not our problem. So when we start to create programs like this that really engage the community, these cities like, oh, okay, maybe these are important pieces of land. Maybe these are worth saving, protecting, and preserving. I guess that was my last thing. I think I said everything I needed to say. Oh, and when in the co-creating space, it creates a healthier lifestyle. That just goes back to the wellness programs. They're a great place to shake a leg. Anyway, thank you guys.
Thank you so much, Monica. And so my name is Matthew Orwatt, and I'm the Agriculture Extension Agent for Texas A&M AgriLife for Dallas County. And I've been in the position here for a year and a half. And what's really interesting to me is when I first got into this position, I was looking for people to partner with on the natural resource area. And then I met Julie Fineman, and it was a perfect time of introduction and the perfect person to meet to work with natural resources in an urban setting. What a better location than local cemeteries that need help with restoration, but also what I've heard the term being used now called rewilding certain areas of the cemetery. So, like for example, at Oakland Cemetery, where they're working to do the prairie restoration in the 6 acres, it's a rewilding. It's taking out the invasives and allowing the native plants and animal species and insect species to flourish. So what they've seen is many native bird species, and Oakland has been on the Audubon's list for bird watching since the 1950s. But along with the more species of birds, you have the insects and you have the plants, and so it's a perfect opportunity for a partnership with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Natural Resources and 4-H. So what we've been able to do with the Master Naturalist is allow new students to work with Julie Fineman and develop projects to remove invasive species and promote native species, identify native plant and insect species, and and enter those into a data base so that we can later analyze and see and note what species have been found over the 2-year period. And that allows citizen scientists to develop their skills to be used in other parts of natural resource education throughout Dallas County and beyond throughout the state. So, the partnership is to help bring this project to other master naturalist chapters. That's the goal, is to get other master naturalist chapters to embrace the constellation of living memorial, to create projects to bring the cemetery Constellation for Living Memorial to other cemeteries throughout the state of Texas. And Texas A&M AgriLife, we have an office and groups in every county, 4-H clubs and master naturalist clubs. We have an office in every county, and we have an agent in every county in the state, so we can have that help bring that ability to spread the word and spread the action. And so what has been done at in here in Dallas with 4-H is we have used the cemeteries as educational sites for starting ecology 4-H clubs, as well as a beekeeping club, and beekeeping and really entomology club. We're focusing on beekeeping this year, but I couldn't make it today because we had the district entomology contest right here in Dallas, and so I was helping with that this morning, and I couldn't let that go because it was important, and because we have an entomology club here in the county, and students participate in the contest. And so, what better way to start with beekeeping? And I know there is some research that shows that the European honeybees compete with native pollinators for resources, and that is true based on the recent studies. But the studies also point to that if you enhance the flora by promoting native flora and even planting native flora, you can overcome that and allow the bees and the native pollinators to coexist and have enough resources for both, which is what my mission is, to work with natural resources and our livestock populations of like bees and other animals and plants to kind of coexist and make sure there's enough resources for everything. And so with the 4-H, it's the same thing. These youth are able to use areas in their communities to have classes, to have hands-on activities, and also meetups with large groups of people, like we had last year at the Master Naturalist Big Chapter Project in Oakland. And so that also goes into Master Gardeners, and Master Naturalists have taken on projects to rewild and to promote native pollinator habitats in the cemeteries, especially Oakland and the Western Heights Cemetery, and working hard to develop those areas into community areas to where people can gather and host events. So some of the events have been hosted. There's been some wellness events and some cooking events hosted, and in the future, there's going to be more master wellness chapters hosting walking events and teaching events in the cemeteries, and also 4-H events, and including a beekeeping courses where we teach about beekeeping in the cemetery and adjacent in some classrooms, but also with that beekeeping education, we include native pollinators so that we help preserve native pollinators while promoting beekeeping, which can be done together. So we're closing this gap between cultural and natural history by working together with the communities as as they are. So we're bringing the people from the communities into these cemetery spaces for learning, for education in the green space, for volunteering, for assessing cultural history. And some of these cemeteries have some beautiful monuments that have been installed over 100 years ago that are part of cultural history and art, works of art, important works of art from Italy even, and all over the world. Ecotourism benefits the local economy to let people come and experience nature in the city. Pollinator support, not just native bees and native butterflies, but bats. that feed on insects that feed on these plants. Um, nature deficit disorder, so that people have experience with nature instead of especially the youth, so that they get out from behind the screens and experience nature firsthand. Migratory way stations for birds and butterflies, reducing the heat index. That's a huge thing. If you go into a place as big as Oakland, I can go and feel the heat of the city and go into Oakland and feel a temperature difference. Wildlife conservation, especially with allowing native milkweeds to flourish to help our native monarch butterflies on their migrations and benefit property values. Now that's something that people are seeing in the neighborhood around Oakland Cemetery. Monica could talk about this, and she's seeing property values go up. Release of the cryptic pools of native seed banks that Monica talked about. Those unknown seeds that because seeds can survive over 100. Not all seeds, but many seeds are adapted to survive over 100 years in soil if they are undisturbed. And if they are disturbed, they can come up from the bottom of the soil and come to the surface again. And this has been proven by research that's been done in Big Bend National Park. And also the trees in Oakland are not manicured, so there are lots of hollow trees where nesting birds and birds of prey can, such as owls and hawks, can nest. And so the 5 of the 8 original cemeteries are Oakland, Western Heights, W.W. Glover, and Albert Carver and Beeman, and they're birthing this next phase. So if you see the map, it's all across Dallas through the center of the city. It's the center of the county as well. And so this is an urban area. It's paved with a lot of asphalt and a lot of buildings. But as you can see throughout this urban area are lots of native natural green spaces of forest. And a lot of this forest is undeveloped. And so a lot of this, and some of it's developed into parks as well. And the cemeteries can link these developed and undeveloped green spaces throughout the county with way stations for education, and linking them together is very important. So I thank you so much for the time and hearing about what we're working on, and it's very important for the future of pollinator education, science education, and community development. Thank you.
So, for your consideration, I know many of you have seen historic cemeteries in need in your neighborhoods. And now you see how we're connecting with community using the resources of Texas A&M AgriLife to pull volunteers from all of their programs, siloed programs that now under the CLM canopy, Constellation of Living Memorials canopy, we're creating a hybrid. And Matt has been so inspired by what we're doing that he has applied for his PhD to create the curriculum for the Master's Constellation of Living Memorials program. So in a couple of years, we hope to launch that. But in the meantime, why wait? Now you have an army of volunteers to help you. You guys are the masters of this knowledge base that needs to be disseminated. And you're my first go-to resource. And so if through our community, we can start establishing this constellation effect where we're growing the constellation one star at a time. We now actually have 5 additional cemeteries that have enlisted themselves outside of the pilot, and that is our intention to continually to grow. We were just featured on the front page of the New York Times a couple of months ago, and that was a privilege for us to then have other universities see the value that we're doing, so much so that Maine University, their forestry department, reached out to me and said, we would like to do what you're doing in Texas here in Maine. We want to create a guide. So we've partnered to create a guide for the state of Maine. And I said, well, while we're at it, please create a template format so as other states wish to adopt this formula, it will be easy for them to do so. So they agreed on that. So that's really exciting. So What are we doing here together? We're strengthening local economies and creating jobs by creating this new way of land management practices. We're reversing nature deficit disorder, and that is for all communities, and no matter what the economics are, no matter what the culture is, especially in urban settings. We have an opportunity to find possibly native vegetation that has been buried in these seed banks, waiting to be released for their time in the sun, that might have been considered now not only endangered, but possibly enlisted on the, what is the word that I'm looking for? Extinct list. And this is where we can rekindle their genetics through Texas A&M, where we can bring that type of vegetation back through the nursery trade. And we're attracting visitors across the street, which then increases the economy in these areas that are so in need of economic strengthening. So I hope you all consider, I have a sign-up list for those who know of a cemetery near you that you're interested in being the volunteer lead, and we will have a guide soon. Thank you, Maine University, for collating all of our information that actually is found in our first year annual report, and where we're going for this year, our 4 initiatives. So they'll make it very easy to follow the formula. So are there any questions? Yes.
Actually, that's but I think put two. What about manicured cemeteries? For instance, federal military cemeteries. A, are they decent places for birding? And B, is there any hope of ever getting those into a cloud?
We're working on it. Through the children. So we have I'll repeat the question. So he basically asked for the national cemeteries that the government takes care of. The veteran cemeteries. They're the mow and blow. They're beautifully manicured. Is there opportunity for birding there? Which, of course there is, but it's limited because unless they have a lot of trees. But we are working on changing, creating a paradigm shift in land management, not just only in historic cemeteries, but cemeteries across the board. We're creating a new movement. A movement that actually we're recycling that the Native American Indians did so well. And so what we hope to do, we have 4 initiatives for this year. One is the Native Youth Propagation Program, where we're going to be teaching kids how to grow natives from seed and cuttings. We've actually reached out to the city of Dallas. They have 14 gorgeous greenhouses that are waiting to be used. And we've asked for a certain portion of them so we can teach the kids this practice in a real live environment instead of a makeshift in a greenhouse on their property behind the school. And then for them to have access to those who work at Parks and Rec, for them to evaluate, well, what is a future looking like working for Parks and Rec? Using native vegetation to be re-established throughout the city. So that's one of the initiatives that's really exciting. And I think it's through the youth that we can start promoting the shift. And any other questions? Oh, we're out of time. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you.